So I would wish now to give floor and to the representatives under Rule, of course, 37 to Lebanon. The representative of Lebanon has the floor, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Allow me to congratulate you and your team for your leadership of the Council for this month. I would also like to commend the members of the Permanent Mission of Russian Federation for a job well done during their presidency last month. We also like to thank the Secretary General for his briefing. Mr. President, while the sun was setting down and many Palestinians were readying themselves for prayers and breaking their fast, Israeli jet fighters and frigates and tanks broke the peacefulness and pounded the Gaza Strip. Over the last 15 days, more than 600 Palestinians were killed, and more than 3,600 were injured. More than 100,000 were displaced. 64 mosques, 8 medical centers, and hundreds of houses were destroyed. Apparently, this is how Israel chooses life for the Palestinian civilians in Gaza. Time and again, we heard the so-called right to self-defense. And based on the figures mentioned above, it is looking like self-help. And some might ask, who will defend the helpless in Gaza? The territory of the State of Palestine is being devastated by the continued occupation and more particularly by the growing illegal settlement activities. Jerusalem is being deprived of its inclusiveness and diversity. The civilians in the West Bank are being subjected to systematic security search, massive arrests, illegal demolition of homes, and collective punishment in a blatant violation of Israel's obligations under international law, international humanitarian law. Mr. President, how many mothers should be bereaved, and how many more youngsters should be assassinated? How much longer should Gaza Strip and its civilian population be punished by imposed blockade, to rainfall of shelling, to repetitive punitive Israeli military strikes, for you to condemn and to put an end to these barbaric actions? The atrocities on the ground should summon the political will in all of you to adopt a resolution to immediately end the violence against civilians. In this context, Lebanon hopes that the efforts led by Egypt and supported by the Secretary General of the United Nations and of other officials in the region or visiting the region will yield into a much-needed ceasefire, which will end the suffering of thousands of civilians. We also support the call by President Mahmoud Abbas to ensure international protection to the people and territory of the State of Palestine. We agree with the Secretary General on the need to address the root causes of the conflict. And in this regard, we think that the international community should finally translate its commitment towards the peace process into action, according to UN relevant resolution, Madrid terms of reference, and the integral provisions of the Arab Peace Initiative. Mr. President, since the adoption of Resolution 1701, my government has reaffirmed its commitment to the full implementation of said resolution. Today, and in light of the latest development in the south of Lebanon, my government stands firm against any attempt to destabilize the situation. Need I remind you that the Lebanese Minister of Foreign Affairs clearly rejected the rocket launch by outlaw individual and marginal groups? Need I remind you that the Lebanese armed forces arrested their perpetrators? Need I also remind you that LAV and UNIFIL continue to work relentlessly to maintain stability. Notwithstanding these endeavors, Israel launched over than 100 shells into the south of Lebanon, undermining the joint efforts of FLAF and UNIFIL and endangering their safety. We therefore lodged a complaint asking you, the Security Council, to condemn in the strongest term the Israeli bombardment, which constitute a blatant breach of Resolution 1701 and a clear violation of the sovereignty of my country. Furthermore, more needs to be done to ensure full implementation of Resolution 1701. Indeed, Israel should immediately end its occupation of northern part of Ghajar, Sheba Farms, and Kfar Shuba Hills. Israel should end its almost daily violations of Lebanon's airspace, and Israel should refrain from any unilateral and provocative action which will lead to escalation. Mr. President, when you have 50,000 to 100,000 refugees in a country, it is a refugee emergency. When you have a quarter of the population of the country now arising, 1/3 estimated by the end of this year, it is a national calamity. Ross Mountain, the UN humanitarian coordinator in Lebanon, said, "Moreover, my country cannot cope alone with this situation, in particular that host communities reach the breaking point. The international community should do more through the provision of direct assistance to the government agencies and by fulfilling the pledges made during the donors' conference. It is alarming that only 29% of the response plan for Syrian refugees living in Lebanon have been funded. Furthermore, burden sharing is a principle that we collectively need to uphold, and we reiterate our call for the intensification of efforts to increase the number of refugees included in resettlement programs. Most importantly, serious efforts should be made on widening the humanitarian space to accommodate the Syrian refugees in safe zones in Syria or in camps along the border. In this context, my government will remain engaged with the international community to ensure a well-calibrated approach to the issue of the Syrian refugees in Lebanon, based on the principles of international law and the need to maintain stability in the country. Mr. President, we commend the Security Council for the adoption of Resolution 2165, and we welcome the Secretary General appointment of Mr. Staffan de Mistura. And we hope that similar consensus will emerge around a much-needed mission of the Security Council to the neighboring countries hosting refugees from Syria. Said mission will allow a first-hand account of the dire situation of those refugees and their host community, and the urgent need to find a political solution to the conflict there. And maybe, during this mission, the members of this august body will meet Ahmad, a 10-year-old boy who fled Syria into Lebanon in 2013. Ahmad dreams of building a time machine, a machine that will take him to a time where there will be a solution and peace in his country, a time which will allow him and many other Syrian children to go back to their homes, their schools, and regain their lost childhood. It is time to heed the call of Ahmad and millions of Syrian people. I thank you, Mr. President.
I thank the representative of Lebanon for her statement.